Hello, everyone. My name is Corinne Late, and I am a co-founder and the current executive director of the Jacaranda Music Hub Limited. And this evening, I'm very pleased to welcome you. Let me just make myself a little bit bigger so you can see my beautiful face. And this evening, I'm very, very pleased to welcome you to a very special edition of our Guest Expert Masterclass series. I'm coming live to you from Marktoberdorf in Germany, and I'm super excited to have an amazing musician in the studio today, ready to share on the topic of creating effective collabs. Noel Nderitu isn't just a talented artist, he's also made a big mark on the Kenyan music scene and beyond. I've been lucky to know him in a couple of really cool ways. First, we both learned guitar from the same awesome teacher, Manasseh Uzele. And second, I got to know him even more during my 5-year stint as the director of the Kenya Conservatoire of Music in Nairobi. Noel has traveled the world with his music, playing in places like Uganda, Tanzania, the US, Australia, and New Zealand. And he's part of a group called Men of Soul, who are known for their amazing acoustic shows. And in 2020, Noel won an award for Best Virtual Live Band, proving that he knows how to wow an audience even through a screen. And his song Enough from his latest album, City on a Hill, well, maybe it's not his latest, now he can tell us, even got nominated for an Afrima Award in 2021. And tonight, he's going to share some insider tips on how to find the right people to work with, how to keep things running smoothly when you're making music together, and how these collaborations can help you really reach more people and really grow your music career. And you'll get to hear about some of Noel's own experiences with collaborations and how they've helped him succeed. And you get to be a part of this. This masterclass is interactive, so don't be shy. Drop your questions in the comments on YouTube or Facebook as they come to you. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session where Noel will answer your questions live. So without further ado, let's get started and dive into a great evening with the fantastic Noel Nderitu. Karibu sana, Noel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I did not realize you were streaming from Germany. So shout out to to you and your peeps in Germany. And shout out to everyone else. I'd love to know who's here. So you have a comment section on this stream. If you're watching this live, please let me know where you're watching it from. Let me know what sort of questions or what sort of expectations you have. And most importantly, let me know what you do. I'd love to know the context of the people that I'm talking to. So whether you're a musician, business owner, content creator, whatever it is, African radio podcast, I see you already in the building. Shout out to you. And just keep us posted on where you are and what you're doing it. Mr. Ron Waudo, I see you as well. Karibu sana to this. If you're going to be watching this later recorded version, then at least you can get to rewind and forward all the nuggets. As you have heard from that amazing intro, I was wondering who you're talking about. My name is Noel Nderitu. I have been doing music for a while now, like 10 years professionally. I started playing a little earlier than that. And today's topic is on collaboration. And so I want to see if I should start with some of the things that I've done in the collaborative space, or maybe end with that. You know, sometimes you begin almost like, this is my pitch, this is why you should listen to me. But I think there's gonna be value, even if you're learning about me for the first time. So karibuni sana. Better Chris, thank you. You are a recording artist, so you're in the right place. Awesome. Anyone else who's logging in, let us know where you're logging in from and what you do. So yeah, I guess I'm speaking mostly to people in the creative space, musicians primarily, because this is Jacaranda Music Hub. But if you're someone who is in another space, I think there's going to be some vital things that you can take from this discussion. So some of the things we're going to touch on include identifying your potential collaborators, aligning your artistic vision. We're going to talk about communicating and just setting goals that you and your collaborators share. We're also going to talk about creative conflict and navigating creative differences, because when you work with people, they don't think like you, they don't process like you, you're bound to to bump some heads here and there, and I've bumped major heads in my time. And we're also going to look at some legal and financial considerations when you do collaborations. And then we're going to see how we can use collabos to, broaden our networks, get to new markets, new audiences. And then we're going to look at some, maybe one or two examples of collaborations that have worked. And then we'll open it up for a Q&A. So let's jump right into it. I want to talk about how to identify, a potential collaborator. But even before we do that, I think one of the most important questions you need to ask or answer for yourself is what your artistic vision is. Oftentimes, creatives can be accused of, being, we have grand ideas, and then we don't know when to specialize, when to focus on what, especially those people who do more than one thing. That's an amazing thing. I wish I was one of you, that I could do like multiple things outside of like just music. So some of you like are great musicians, but you're also great communicators. You're great at admin. You're great at graphic design. You can do all these things, and sometimes that it becomes muddy when you're trying to figure out what you want to do. So I think the first question you should ask or answer is, what is your artistic vision? Because before you can identify someone to collaborate with, then you need to be able to articulate your artistic vision in a broad way and in a summarized way. Broadway is, you're thinking long term, you're thinking what you want to do in the next 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And then in a summarized way is almost like your elevator pitch, because you'll find sometimes you're not going to have the incredible honor of letting people peer into your life for an extended period. You may meet a musician that you look up to, and they'll tell you, hey, I have 40 minutes in my itinerary. I'm in your city. Can we make something work? You're not going to use the first 35 just telling them how grand of a vision you have. You should be able to articulate it also in a summarized way. So I think learning what to specialize on when is important. I'm not a proponent of, you must do one thing. I think times and seasons are different, and in different seasons you might be doing different things. So the goal here is not for you just to focus on one thing, but is to realize what is the most important thing now, right? In your vision, in your artistic vision, what is the most important thing that you should be focusing on now? So if you're just starting out, for example, and you want to be, let's say you want to be a guitarist, the most important thing for you would be to be proficient in your instrument, right? So your first couple of years is just going to be around you rehearsing, practicing, knowing how to apply what you've learned, probably sight reading. A lot of it would be around your gift, right? And then maybe year 5 to 10 would be, I want to establish myself as a go-to session musician in my city or in my country, right? So that would look very different from your year 1 to 5. So that's what I'm trying to get at. Once you get your artistic vision, I think now you're at a place where you can reach out to other people and see how can you now enhance what I am trying to do, right? And before we even go outside, I think we need to look internally and see what are the things that I'm doing well, and are there people around me that I can have internal collaboration with before I try and get it externally. Excuse me. So internal collaboration is, this is my artistic vision. I've gotten to the point where I cannot do it by myself. I've tried to handle every aspect of my artistic vision, but I'm getting some roadblocks here and there. So how do I mitigate that? And having an internal collaborative team would be vital for you. initially when you begin any venture, whether it's a new business, whether it's learning an instrument, whether it's singing, trying to be a recording artist, whatever it is, you'll find that in those initial times, you're going to be dabbling in very many things, not just the artistic, but everything that surrounds it. So I remember oftentimes, like when I began, if someone was trying to book me for a show, I would talk as if I have like a really large team. Like on the phone, I'd be like, "Yeah, so we are going to get back to you." And my but we was me. I was the booking agent. I was the one doing promo. I'm the one who's playing the instrument. I'm the one writing the songs. And initially, you do that because you haven't built the muscle of learning what collaboration is, and you don't even know how to get the people that you need. Sometimes you can't even articulate the needs that you have. You find out, at some point that this is something that I need. I need to learn how to do it. But then there comes a time where you cannot carry the load alone, and so finding, even if it's a freelance team where you just get together for projects and then you disband, is going to be very effective. So as initially you might be the one doing a lot of the back end, but working with people is inevitable. So I think the first sphere of collaboration is getting people to align with your artistic vision. So before they even jump on the grand idea that you may have, they are the ones who come together to make sure that you're articulating what that vision is. And so it may look like, for example, a lot of artists are good at the creative in terms of making music. So like I'll use myself for example. I love to make music, I love to write songs. But I'm not so thrilled when it comes to marketing music. Like I feel like that just, it snuffs out the life out of me. Or thinking about how to brand myself, right? Those are things that other people may be passionate about that maybe off the top of my head I'm not. So collaboration in that way would look like uh, approaching a graphic designer and saying, "Hey, every time I have a release, could we collaborate on artwork? And this is what I'm offering you as value, and this is what you'd be getting in return." So what I'm getting at is how to identify these internal collaborators is, number one, there are two or three ways you can do this. One is you can approach the work for hire, which is someone has a service that you require, you pay them upfront for it. That's the easiest way to get someone to work with you, right? And then the second way is the long-term value for value. That is, you've heard the phrase quid pro quo, where you scratch my back, I scratch your back. And for an industry like ours that is still very infant in many ways, you'd find that a lot of people are still upholding this method to survive and to continue to make great work. Even some of the biggest artists in Nairobi, you'd be shocked that a lot of them have just collaborative agreements rather than straight up, I pay you and then you leave. Not that they don't, pay people, but a lot of it is based on first their relationship. And so this means that you look in your networks and say, what value do I have to offer, and what service can I get in return? So I've seen examples of musicians who are beginning or starting out, trying to have collaborative endeavors. Like, you find a rehearsal space, you know that you need to rehearse maybe weekly, you have a band, you're trying to work on your sound. You might not have the funds to continually fund the studio space, pay for the studio space so that you can rehearse. I've seen places where the musician tells the studio space owner, "Hey, listen, in exchange for studio space, if you ever need like a background singer, or if you ever need a guitarist, I'd be happy to jump on the music that you're working on with no fee, and then in return, give me X amount of hours in the studio." So if the studio space owner is working on like a pro bono work or a passion project, then that's incentive for him. And if the studio was not booked and he was not making any money from it, then there is value exchange there. I've also seen session musicians do this for each other, where I need some guitars on my song. I'm a producer. You can play guitars on my song, and then I can do the same for you when you need my services. So I'm a singer. If you need some background vocals or some vocal arrangement, and so that's some of the value for value that I'm talking about. So I mentioned work for hire, value for value, and then the third one is just the ability to play a role. Like, one of the most important things you learn in collaboration is uh, learning how to play a role. If you don't know how to play a role, and I think I'll speak on this on its own later, then you're not going to be able to collab. So now that we've talked about getting our artistic vision down, then now let's look at how to identify potential collaborators. Collabs Identifying potential collaborators could take two or three forms, and I'll talk about. I already mentioned one when I talked about role. So one is identifying the collaborator based on things that we share, right? Fastest way you can find a potential collaborator is looking at the things that you share. So this could be a value system, this could be goals, this could be a skill set, this could be genre. If you're a musician, it's very easy to feel like, I want to work with so and so because they play the same type of music that I do, or they play the same instrument that I do. There's a shared skill set there, or there's a shared genre. That's quite frankly the easiest way to identify a collaborator. One, identify the things that you share. Second way you can identify a potential collaborator is by what I'd call strategic placement. A lot of what we see in the collaborative spaces is me recognizing that you have a niche or an audience that I don't have, and vice versa. And now seeing how can I partner with you to elevate my brand to your audience, and how can you have access to my brand, and there being a mutual benefit. So this is more strategic. Sometimes, like even in music, you'll find like like I posted a snippet on collaboration today on my socials, and someone responded by saying, there's a musician called Bobby Shmurda. I don't know if you guys know Bobby Shmurda. He's a rapper from the US, and apparently he has a song with a Tanzanian musician named Harmonize. Harmonize is not a rapper in any way, shape, or form. And so that person was kind of asking me, so how did this happen? It looks like because I am of the opinion that collaboration happens when you share genre or value. But I think that was more of like a strategic placing. When you find someone who is like from this genre and he's collaborating with someone from this genre, there might be strategy in play there where they're trying to cross pollinate their audiences. I think we saw that with if you remember in the early 2000s, and I know some of you are not born, but in the early 2000s there was a rap and rock collaboration between the musician Jay-Z and the rock band called Linkin Park. And they realized that they were big in their worlds. Jay-Z is big in the rap world, Linkin Park were big in the rock world, and they said, what would happen if we actually just collaborated on songs that our fans love and make it one song? And so Linkin Park had a song called Numb, Jay-Z had a song called Encore, and they re-recorded it and made it one song. And so there was cross-pollination here. So that's an example of identifying a potential collaborator based on strategy. So the first one I mentioned was just based on your shared values and shared skill sets. Second one I've just mentioned is based on strategy. And then the third one is based on the role that is needed. So if I need, for example, I'm making a Pan-African song and I need like 4 Southern African artists, already that means that I need to understand the All right, I think I am back. Apologies for that. Let me know if you can hear me on the comments. This apparently there's like a cable in the sea that has been harassing Kenyan internet. But hopefully you can hear me, and hopefully you've not logged off. I can see some people joined in as we were going on. Miss Mina, I see you, and Joseph Wamba, I see you as well. Shout out from Gong, that's where I grew up. So shout out to y'all. Yeah, I was talking about identifying potential collaborators, and I talked about identifying them via the shared things you have and via strategy. And the third one I talked about is via role. And so I think personally for my career, I've preferred the model of shared values because shared values means shared effort, and it means shared delivery. It means that everyone sees this for what it is, and they see you as a partner, someone you can do the grind and the work with. If you jump one of those steps, I think it could be detrimental. Another thing I want to talk about is something that I mentioned this week in a podcast, is the story about networking and how we view networking, because a lot of us get to points where we hear there's a music event or a music sort of networking event. Shout out to you, Paul, I see you. A music networking event where the aim is to just broaden your networks and meet new people and hopefully collab with people. And I've gone to several of those events, and 9 times out of 10 you won't get the sort of collaborations that you'd wish. I mean, you'll have conversations here and there, but this is it's formed my philosophy on what networking is. And so my philosophy is network horizontally. Don't network vertically. Networking vertically is the idea that I must reach out of my circle to someone in the same field that has achieved, much more uh, experience, growth, accolades, awards, because somehow, if I just collaborate with this one person, then my life is going to change. I think a lot of us view things that way, not just musicians, but even businesses. Businesses are like, yo, if we could just collaborate on a reel together with ABCD company, like it's going to give me so much exposure. But I've really found that it's quite the inverse. It's detrimental because one, it's a big deal to you, but most time it's not a big deal to the other person because they are a couple of steps ahead of you. Secondly, their audience is primarily loyal to them, not to you. So while they may take you as a recommendation if their person endorses you, they're not going to be loyal to you until you do something that they need, right? So the idea that if I just collab with so and so, all their fans will become my fans is quite a stretch. But the idea of networking horizontally is looking at your peer group, whatever it is that you do, whether it's the same business, same music, same instrument that you play, looking at your peers and going, who is doing and walking in the same vein as I am, who has the same shared goals, values, the same hustle, and is there value in us exchanging? And you'll find that there's a lot of there's a lot of there's lack of hindrance when you're networking horizontally. So for example, if I look at myself and I look at an artist who maybe has been in the game the same time as I have, or reaches to the same audience, or has the same number of followers that I do, those are some of the metrics that kind of show you who your peers are. And if I reach out to that person, we are more likely to work together because one, we have a relationship, two, we talk to the same people, than me trying to jump 10 steps and go into the biggest artist in the city, who one might not have even heard my music, two might not really see it as a mutually beneficial situation. So I think, out of everything I've said about identifying potential collaborators, I think my advice would be to look horizontally before you look vertically. Now, you may look vertically and things may open up, but look horizontally at who is on the line with you. Think of a 100-meter race. If you look to the left and to the right, who is there who's going to run with you to the end? You don't look at the world record yet if you've just started running your 100-meter race. Like, you look at your personal best. Like, can I get a personal best time that will qualify me to the race? And so, just those are some compressed thoughts about identifying collabs. I also want to talk about how to communicate and how to set shared goals with your collaborators. Like, how do you communicate the need for collaboration? Number one, the biggest thing I think is having a relationship. Establish a relationship first. Establish a relationship first. I can't stress that more. If you're in the chat or in the room and you are creative, you know that creatives are dangerously suspicious. And what I mean by that is, if I don't know who you are, it is very difficult for me to have my guard down, right? Because everyone treats you, a musician, with that sort of reverence for, I see you on stage, so I want association with you. I want to kind of take. That's usually the thing that happens. So the suspicion is, are you who you say you are? And the only way that suspicion can break is if we establish a relationship. So if one of you reached out to me on an Instagram DM, and the first thing that you're doing is asking me for a collaboration, the likeliness or likelihood of me saying no is very high, because one, I don't know you, so there's no person attached to this message. I'm just viewing it as a generic message. Like there's no personality, there's no relationship. And then secondly, I think you're just seeing me for what value I'm going to give you. You're not seeing me as a human in that time or point. But the human element is what breaks down the wall of suspicion. So I would encourage everyone to establish relationships before you begin to ask for things. Establish relationships. Use things and love people. Don't love things and use people. That's a quote a friend of mine likes to say. Use things and love people. So it applies even when you're trying to collaborate with people. Like find out who they are first before you try and use what they have. And then secondly, I'd say is show up. A lot of people, claim to want to collaborate with different guys, different entities, but don't even know what those entities are doing, right? Don't even know. Uh, an artist may have a showcase or a concert. You don't go, you don't show up, you don't buy tickets, and I think there the posture is usually take, take, take. Like this is what I want from you, but if the posture can be give and take, then it enhances point one of establishing a relationship. Once you establish a relationship, you have to build on it. And building on it is showing up, is being there, even when it's not necessarily beneficial for you, right? And then thirdly, I'd say is always follow their artistic endeavors. I've mentioned shows, showing up for concerts, but this allows you or gives you a glimpse as to whether you guys share something that could work together well, right? You may meet an artist who is an incredible singer, but you find that their range and where your vocal range is, you won't find a middle ground, right? But if you follow their artistic endeavors, they might shock you by doing a song that's in that genre that you love. But if you box them, you hear one song and you think that's the total summation of their artistic life, then you've boxed them and you won't be able to see the potential that exists when it comes to collaboration. So setting goals becomes easier once a relationship has been established and once it's been reaffirmed. I'll give you an example of something I did a couple of years ago. I want to say in 2018, that's when 2017, 18 is when I really began recording music a lot. And when you record music, you get to play it publicly for concert goers. That's where you kind of prove your worth, that you're not just a recording artist, that you can play live. And so at the time I was playing live a lot, and I remember I had a discussion with an artist, actually two artists, who were actually they're older than me, but we are peers in that sense. Like we began doing music at the same time. And so one artist, his name was Tetushani, and Fadhili. We got together and realized that actually we have very different audiences. At the time, we had very different audiences, and we desired a cross pollination of audiences. Like I wanted his fans to know know what my music is, and they wanted access to my fans. And so we came up with this show called The Unknown Order. It was a concept show where we realized that when you're on the bill as an artist, if there are two artists, usually my fans at the time would ask me, what time is your set? So the concert is maybe 7 to 11 p.m. And maybe on the bill they've written Noel Nderitu, Tetushani, whoever. The main question I would get asked is, what time is your set? Because my fans just want to come and watch my show and then leave. And the other artists' fans want to do the same. So we realized that it's not helping in our quest to get new audiences. So we came up with this concept of a show called The Unknown Order, where we said we are three artists on the bill: Noel, Fadhili, Tetushani, and you don't know who's going up when. So once we got on stage, we put our three names in a hat. We called up a fan to randomly pick a paper from the hat, the cape, and whoever was read that's the person who's going to open the show. So we didn't know the order, hence the name, the unknown order. And so that means that everyone who came, even if you just knew one artist on that show, you had to sit through the whole thing, because if I played first and you came to watch Fadhili, like, you have to wait for him. So you have to sit through my set. Excuse me. And I think that was just it's an example of relationship. One, we knew each other as artists, and then we showed up for each other's events and saw the enthusiasm that each of our fan bases had. And then lastly, we followed each other's artistic endeavors. Like, we saw a glimpse of where, I know Noel as the live band guy, but he also plays acoustic, so I can exploit that. Like, oh, I know Fadhili as the Afrofusion guy, but he's just done an amazing ballad. We can exploit that. We saw where there were glimpses of possible collaboration. And I think some of the fans I have now are from that 2018 era where we were doing, collaborative stuff like this. So that's just an example I'd wanted to, to show you when it comes to just setting shared goals. All right, I can see some questions rolling in. I think we'll have a time for Q&A. So keep throwing them in. If a question comes and you don't want to forget it, just type it in the comment section, and I'm sure we will, through the help of our gracious host Corinne, attack all your questions one by one. So feel free to type them in the comment section. All right, now I want to talk about creative differences and navigating that, and conflict resolution. A lot of times when you're working with people, this is a life thing, not a music thing. If you're working with people, you're bound to disagree. You're bound to disagree for sure, because you have strong opinions. I have strong opinions. And creative people are very vulnerable people. So I think the first thing that needs to happen is to build trust. Trust is an amazing thing for a creative, because one of the most vulnerable things I do is to open up artistically to someone else, right? By the time I'm releasing a song, my vulnerability has already gone through hills and valleys. By the time I'm ready to share it with the world, and I'm like, I'm okay, whether they like it or hate it, I'm okay. I'm at a really, really toned down vulnerability state. The one place where I'm most vulnerable is when I first articulate an idea from my head to my phone, or record a demo, and then I'm about to share it with someone else for the first time, whether it's a producer, whether it's a guitarist, whether it's just someone who gives me honest feedback. That's when I am most vulnerable, because I feel like, if they say it sucks, I have to go back to the drawing board. And so if there's no trust, true art cannot thrive. That's a statement I like to make. If there is no trust, then true art cannot thrive. And I hope that each of us understand that, because even in business, if there is no trust, if you partner with someone for a business and you don't trust them, trust me, you will be second guessing everything they do. You will be going through all the books of accounts that maybe they're in charge of. Like, if there's no trust, you cannot thrive. And trusting your skill set is one thing, where you trust your ability, or your strengths and weaknesses, but also being aware that this great skill set I have, it can be enhanced by someone else. Someone else can step in and say, why don't you change this? And it would actually get better. I think creatives really need to get to that point. Before you can collaborate with anyone, you need to get to the point where, yes, I think I am decent, or I think I am good, or I think I am great, but if I involve someone else, it is possible that my great will become excellent, or my excellent will become world class, we need to get to that point where we are okay with people enhancing our work, and that doesn't mean that it takes away from who we are or what our talent is. And so trust that your skill set is great, but also trust that it can always be enhanced by someone else, just like you probably have enhanced people's work. And so that's why we have, for example, if you look at cover songs, right? You look at a song of an artist that you love, and then you do a deep dive, and then you find someone did a cover of that song, and it's mind blowing. It's better than the original. You're like, this should have been the person who was given this song. That's a glimpse of what trust can do. Allowing someone to speak into your music, and then they make it exponentially greater. Good art always begets good art. And so one of the ways to navigate creative differences I have found is to always have open communication loops. Now, communication, if you've studied, language,
Sorry, Noel, you have muted your mic. Huh?
thank
Yeah.
you for that.
So you said language and then you muted, so you can carry on from there.
I talk with my hands, so I think I just pressed it. But yeah, I was talking about language, and if you study language, then you'll see that communication has levels, right? There's a level where you just um, are giving facts, like it is 8 o'clock, and then there's a deeper and more intimate level where you share values and goals and dreams. So if you're collaborating with someone, then your communication loop needs to have two things, in my view. One, it needs to be accurate. That means that your communication should not be vague, and it should not be only emotional. This is what I mean. Vague communication is, I think the song lacks something. Okay, what does it lack? You haven't communicated what it's lacking, right? And then emotional just means that I don't like it, right? Like it's not emotion that's triggered from a factual standpoint. Because a lot of these opinions that you'll give to your collaborators are going to be maybe colored with your preference or bias. So it's important to not just be fully emotional, where you're only going with what you feel is right. And then it's important for you also not to be vague, right? So be as concise as possible, be as specific as possible. Um, Constructive feedback looks like, I think the bridge is too long. Could we shorten it from 8 bars to 4 bars? That's more specific then. There's something missing with the bridge. That's a bit vague. Because anyone, even a layman, can identify that. So make sure your communication loop is accurate. And then secondly, make sure your communication loop is timely. I struggle with this a lot, where feedback comes at the wrong time. I'll give you an example. Oftentimes, musicians reach out to me and say, hey, this is a song that I'm working on. I would love your feedback on it. And I love that. I love someone being vulnerable enough to let someone else peer and speak into their work. But here's what is the funny thing. A lot of times people send me a song and say, please give me feedback on this. And then my follow-up question is usually, what type of feedback do you want? I'll ask if there's anything specific that you want to hear. And then secondly, I ask, at what stage is this song in? So if someone sends me a song on Tuesday and then they tell me, oh, I'm releasing the song on Friday, then you don't want feedback. You probably want affirmation. You want to hear that the song is good, right? So developing a communication loop that is realistic or is timely is important. If I'm collaborating with you and we go through the whole process, now the song has been mixed, the song is at the mastering stage, is at the final stage, and now you want to change the hook. You feel like the chorus is not good. If you just communicated that in a timely manner, we wouldn't have wasted a whole process and now try to backtrack and change things. So I think those are two ways of trying to mitigate creative differences or to handle conflict, is just to have open communication loops and making sure that they're accurate and they're timely. And then the other thing that I would say is, I mentioned this earlier and I said I'm going to speak on it, is to have well-defined roles. Always have well-defined roles. A lot of times creatives, because we work on this magic that the world doesn't understand, where because of the skill set that you have, you can create an idea from nothing in your mind and give it life. A lot of times we bypass the place where we now assign realistic roles, because sometimes the creative work seems so magical that you don't want to break that vibe. That is usually us. But our relationships or the vibe cannot take the place of role assigning. If you fail in this stage, then failure is inevitable. If you fail to assign roles, then it is only a matter of time until things fall apart. So there's a need for clearly defined roles if you don't want conflict to arise. 90% of conflict that arises from collaborative work is because there were not any clear defined roles. So I'll give you an example of the biggest boy band here, South Soul, who are on a break now, right? They have clearly defined roles. Apart from the team that they gathered, remember when we started, I talked about having an internal team that can articulate your artistic vision. The four of them had clearly defined roles, right? So Bien was the primary songwriter. That is a defined role. Like, your work is to write songs, right? Polycarp and Savara were in charge of production. So when the song leaves the songwriting stage, it is your role to make it a finished musical product, right? Chimano's role was aesthetic and concept design. So what look are we going to have for this music video? What look are we going to have for the stage? What are we looking for? What are we going for stylistically for this album, for this song, right? So it will be very difficult now to get mad at Chimano because he wrote one song in the last 2 months, right? That's not his primary role. So he can write a song, but because roles have been defined, he can thrive in where he has been placed, right? So it would be hard to come to BN and say, hey, why aren't you giving us ideas on stage development? You've given him a role, right? And so it's important, and I think that's the glue that sticks. For example, a group in that example, that's a group. A group can only stay that long if there are clearly defined roles and if there are ways to mitigate how these roles can overlap, so that I don't feel like, you're not doing a good job, so let me come and do what you're doing, right? There are ways to mitigate that. Like, how do we address if you're not doing a good enough job? Another collaborative endeavor that I was able to participate in was Coke Studio Africa. Coke Studio Africa was a Pan-African music reality TV show or live performance show and I did it for 2 seasons. So this is about we did probably 120 to 130 songs a season. So you can imagine, in my time there, I worked on probably 250 songs. And the typical example of a week was they would have 4 artists in a week paired together. So artist A, artist B, artist C, artist D. And they each need to make from scratch 4 songs. So artist A and artist B will collaborate on 4 or 5 songs. So we do 10 songs a week. And the only way that it thrived was there were clearly defined roles. So there was artist X, artist Y. There was a music producer for each of the pairing, right? So a music producer is assigned to you. There was a music director for the live performances. There was a TV director. There were session musicians on call. That was what we were doing. Um, it makes a huge task possible. So imagine a production like that that didn't have defined roles. Like you just show up on set and hope things work out. It's not going to work. And so, like, for example, I sang on the show. There were some songs that I didn't particularly like, right? But because I've been assigned a role, whether or not you like what's happening, this is what you need to do to execute. And so when I talk about well-defined roles, I think there's strength in that, and your collabs will work if you adhere to that. And then also there's legal and financial considerations. So you've identified your potential collaborator. You've established the relationship. You've built on it, and I mean, you've begun work. You've had some creative differences here and there. You've worked through them. You've learned how to communicate, to have those open communication loops. You've done all the right things, defined roles. This is where collabs also break. There's a lot of, in the music industry, there's also a lot of instances where songs get to the finish line, and because of some legal or financial consideration, those songs don't see the light of day. And how do we fix this? The problem with musicians from my generation is that legally we depend on vibes. We don't read the fine print. We just feel like, if the vibe is right, I trust everyone in the room. But if you do get to the finish line of a song, as songs feel like magic sometimes and you don't know how far they could go, that's a good thing and a bad thing. Because if it doesn't go anywhere, then you had a great experience, right? And I use that very loosely. Like if it doesn't go anywhere, it always goes somewhere. Even if you're a musician here who has, a couple thousand views or a couple hundred views, those are people, those are not robots that watched it. But let's say that it didn't get to the mark that you desired. Then you go home with a great experience. You collab with someone that you appreciate, you value, and you enjoy the experience. But in the event that the song does do numbers, if you skipped your bases when it came to legal or financial, then you will have a problem. So this is the conversations where we introduce things like split sheets. I don't know if you guys are aware of what split sheets are. If you're a business and you're jumping into a potential collaboration with a brand, this is where contracts come in, right? And so my top advice would to musicians or to businesses who are entering into any sort of merger or collaboration in that sense is to hire a lawyer. If you have an agreement that has been drafted, you need to give it to the proper lawyer. Okay. If I am working on, let's say, an advertising agency hires me because they feel my face will do well on a billboard, right? Usually they'll come with the money that they're offering you. But if there's a contract involved, it's important for you to read through it and to have a lawyer read through it, because some of the fine print you're not going to be able to decipher on your own. So this gives basis on the financial implications as well. So I'll mention, I've seen even Ron has asked if I can mention what split sheets are. I can mention it in this example. So if I'm doing a song with Ron and we love the song, we found a good middle ground, and the song does numbers without us knowing. A split sheet allows us to know who owns what in terms of the publishing. So in a typical song, you have the master recording, and then you have the publishing rights. So the master recording, whoever paid for the the production of the song will own the master, the copyright. But the publishing allows the different people who worked on the song to exploit it financially. So if someone else produced it, if there was a session musician, anyone who worked on the song, someone who wrote lyrics or wrote melodies, who is part of the songwriting team, then they are entitled to publishing rights. And so if I signed one with Ron where I said, you know what, for our agreement, I think let's go on a 50-50 basis, where I'll own 50% of publishing and you will. So if our song gets picked by a Netflix series and they say, hey, we have $10,000 for this song to be placed on episode 2 of season 3 of this show, now I will not keep quiet and not tell Ron and eat the 10,000, because we signed a split sheet. That means after all our expenses, half will go to Ron, half will go to me. But you see, most people don't have such an agreement. So even the financial implications cannot be exploited because we didn't consider those things to begin with. So when you're having a collaboration, especially with someone who is outside of your circle, it's really important to do your due diligence and cover your bases there. And then next, I want to talk about some of the music collaborations that I've seen that had the specific intention of broadening the networks, right? So we can use collaborations for broader networks. And how can we do this? You always get to a point where, especially like in a small scene, let's use Nairobi for example, where you know just a circle of musicians, and then you quickly max out the landscape. Like you look left, right. I have done a song with that guy. Oh, that guy has played on my song. You feel like you've sort of gotten to the end of what this current landscape offers. So how do you use collaborations now to broaden your network? This is the idea where you cast your net wide so that you can potentially reap some benefits. And so I gave the Jay-Z Linkin Park idea earlier. I think right now we are in a good era where the lines are blurred when it comes to collaboration. We are seeing a lot of joint projects. I think from like 2010, if you listen to hip hop, Kanye West and Jay-Z did a joint album. If you're into like jazz, soul, Robert Glasper has a series of albums called Black Radio, where it's fully collaborative, over like 10 to 12 artists per album. During the pandemic, if you guys remember the Versus battle, I don't know if you remember Versus. I don't know how they spell, like Noel versus someone. There was an Instagram series called Versus, where different artists would be paired with like their peer or their contemporary, and then they would play their catalog side by side, and it's just a way during the pandemic to keep people engaged. And it became a thing. It was licensed to a network as well. I believe it was sold. I believe it's the brainchild of Timbaland and Swiss Beats. You've also seen in the American context the Super Bowl, which is a halftime show of a game that I barely understand, but prioritizes a 15-minute musical experience. And in recent years, it's usually one artist that is booked for that event, but in recent years, they've been collaborative. The year Bruno Mars was there, he brought out Coldplay and Beyonce. A couple of years ago, Jennifer Lopez did it with Shakira. So why do you think this happens? This is because artists now have figured out that if I could just get my life into that person's musical landscape, that there are a bunch of people who don't know about my music, who can experience it for the first time or be reminded of what it did for them. So you'll find older musicians who have done music for 15, 20 years, and now we look at them as legacy artists. They'll reintroduce themselves to current audiences by collaborating with newer musicians. So let me look for an example in Kenya. I don't know if they've been like collaborative. Oh, I remember one from the early 2000s. I want to say mid 2000s. If you remember, there was a group called Necessary Noise. Necessary Noise linked up with a Ugandan musician named Bebe Cool, and they formed a super group called East African Bashment Crew. What a name! But that's I can see a parallel with all the other ideas I've mentioned, all the other examples I've mentioned from the West. The idea was Necessary Noise is big in Kenya, Bebe Cool is big in, and I don't know if Chameleon, I think Chameleon was there as well. Like there was a Tanzanian artist, a Kenyan artist, and a Ugandan artist. And the idea was we need to be in each other's lives so that we can exploit each other's audiences. And I think more recently you've seen that with Soul Generation, where a bunch of artists come together under one umbrella and try and leverage from the primary audience of Sauti Soul, right? So an artist like Nviri or Ben Soul have benefited from what Sauti Soul had built. So that's how you broaden your network. Essentially, it's finding a potential collaborator that is right up your alley, that has done the hard work of having strong roots, a strong foundation. And I think other examples in the African field, I remember a song, Fali Ipupa. You guys know Fali? Fali Ipupa did a song or a project with Awilo Longomba. Awilo Longomba is like super old school. Like he's like the generation before, but that's the same idea. An older musician now tapping into a new audience through collaboration. He's broadening his network. I know an example of PJ Morton doing stuff with Stevie Wonder. Even like Ed Sheeran doing stuff with John Mayer. Charlie Wilson, you guys know Charlie Wilson. Charlie Wilson was a musician from the 70s and 80s. He was in a group called the Gap Band, and then reinvented himself in the 2000s by collaborating with people like Snoop Dogg and Justin Timberlake. And so I think it's a very useful key to use collaboration to reinvent yourself, to broaden your networks, and to introduce yourself to new audiences. All right. So my final thoughts on this would be, my take home would be the two things that I mentioned. One being collaborate horizontally. Try as much to see who is on the line with you. Think of yourself as being in a sprint race. Okay, we are Kenyan, so marathon. Okay, we have Omanyala. Okay, they both apply. Being in a sprint race, looking left and right and seeing who am I running with and who is bringing value to the table and what sort of value am I bringing and how can we collaborate. And then secondly, I would say use what you have until it's time to move up. A lot of times, most of you are crippled because you feel like, I don't have X so that I can do what I want. I don't have enough money. I don't have the right networks. I don't have a relationship with artist X. But trust me, if that's your mindset, you're never going to even move to the point where you can collaborate. Use what you have now, use it to the full extent. If you can only shoot a video with a phone, shoot that video with a phone. If you can only record with a borrowed microphone and a laptop and one audio interface, do it until you get to the point where, wow, I have a master network that I need to move from this level to the next. That would be those would be my final thoughts. I think I've mentioned some of the collaborative things that I've done. But in case you're learning about me today, I can sort of just peer through some of the things that I've done that I think would give context to the conversation we've had. I've been involved in, I mentioned Coke Studio Africa, 2 seasons, highly collaborative show. I've done some songwriting for a TV show called Groove Theory that ran, I think, in 2015, 2016. I wrote 2 seasons. We wrote about 100 songs, and I was collaborating primarily with 2 other writers. Yeah, I ran an acoustic ensemble called Men of Soul. Men of Soul is not a group, it's a collective. That means that people do what they do individually, and from time to time we come together when the need is right to make music. And that is also a highly collaborative thing, because it's 4 different artists who have their own fan bases coming together to make a product, right, that each of us has a say in. Yeah, and personally, I've also collaborated with a couple of musicians in the Nairobi scene, most notably Lisa Odo Noah, Sage, Riga. I'm trying to remember. So many. But yeah, and yeah, I think I should check the back of my last album. I'm forgetting people, but maybe we can move to the Q&A. But over to you, Corinne, if you have anything that you want us to be aware of.
Yeah, thank you very much. Noel, I'm sure everyone watching shares the same sentiment with you that that was really an amazing and very, very insightful session. I'll just go through the comments now and I'll put on the screen the questions that people have asked, and maybe you can just have a look at those and address them. Okay, so I think Better Chris had some questions here. I'm sure some of them have been answered as he has been talking, but you can just kind of summarize once more. Yeah, he asked, can you share an example of a successful artistic collaboration you've been a part of and what made it thrive?
Yeah, yeah, I think I mentioned on some of them. I think the first ever artistic collaboration that I was part of that thrived was even before the show I mentioned, The Unknown Order. I did another show. There was a show in Nairobi called Thursday Night Live. It was like an acoustic roots and jazz show. And at the time, Tetushani and I did not have, it was a 2-hour show, and the contract says that you needed to play 2 hours of original music. And I think at the time, none of us had that sort of content. So we decided to do a double bill where I played an hour and he played an hour. And that kind of gave me the spark to do more collaborative work, because his fans had to watch my show and my fans had to watch his show. And then I saw that it worked, that this was a way to sort of introduce myself to new audiences. And so that's what gave me the spark to begin Men of Soul. And so I think I'll give that example as the spark to other successful artistic collaborations. Yeah. And I think it thrived because there was a willingness for each of us to be ourselves without feeling like someone is taking from you. I think when you come to the table, you always have to come with a willingness, as I mentioned, that I am able to enhance what you're doing and you have the same ability, so that it's not one-sided where I just feel like I can enhance yours, but what I'm doing is right. You also have the opportunity to enhance mine. So it will always thrive when there's that sort of synergy.
I think is Tetu the one who sang Chikoleko.
I don't know if it's Chikoleko. What's Tetu's song? Tetu's
Yeah.
biggest song is what? Africa Sun. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right. So, Better Chris also asks, what role does flexibility play in creative alliances, and how do you adapt to unexpected challenges during collaboration?
Yeah. Flexibility is key. If you're working with people, there is no way, shape, or form that things will go your way 100%. So I'll give an example of the TV show I told you about. It was a musical. So if you've watched like Glee or High School Musical, like some of these shows that have singing intertwined, right? We had to write music for the show in that way. And I'll give you an example of flexibility. You write an amazing song that you think is amazing, you and your co-writers, and it gets to the writers, and the writers are like, this song sucks. Like you need to go to the drawing board. Then you've talked about adapting to unexpected challenges. Initially, maybe the production tells you guys have a month to write this song, to write these songs, and then 2 days later, someone comes and says, actually, we have 8 days to write these songs. I'm talking about 100 songs, right? So if you're not flexible, you're going to say, thanks, guys, it's been real. But you have to be flexible because maybe a deposit has landed in your account and you spent the money on Java yesterday. Are you going to return the money or be flexible and do it in a way that you hadn't planned on doing it? So working with people will always make you aware that your way is not the only way. And that's the flexibility that I think you need the most. That there are 3 different ways of skinning a cat. I have only dealt with one. There are 2 others in the room. Am I flexible enough to hear them out? So yeah, that's the approach.
Don't skin cats, please. Chris also asked, how do you ensure that each member of the Creative Alliance feels valued and heard throughout the collaboration?
Right. One of the things that I talked about was trust. I don't know if you remember when I talked about trust, I talked about when you're in the creative process, if you've built an alliance, you should not build an alliance as the Swahili people say, hohe hahe. You should not build an alliance for the sake of. There needs to be a high level of trust that you believe that everyone who's contributing here has a vital contribution. So allowing yourself to be in the driver's seat once or twice and not feel in a certain type of way when other people are in the driver's seat. So it could be your project, for example, maybe it's your brainchild. But if you've surrounded yourself with people who can bring out what you're trying to do, then there needs to be a clear or there needs to be an equal sort of billing from everyone that this is what I'm bringing to the table and this is how it's been enhanced. If you say that we are collaborating and it's only you speaking into the collaborative effort, then it's not a collaboration and people will feel devalued and they will not feel heard. But if you come to the table and we are all contributing, then we all feel heard. I'll leave you with this. There's someone who said, like, if I ever call you for a meeting, right? Or if I call you for a brainstorming session and we spend 90 minutes, and in the 90 minutes you don't say anything, you then you should have not come, right? We've called you to the brainstorming session so that you can, because I value what you're going to say. So if you don't even have the voice to bring it out, then you should have stayed at home. So, and I think it's the same way with a creative alliance. Everyone should recognize that I'm here, I am part of this table because I have something valuable to bring. And I think that's how you can ensure everyone is heard and felt.
Thank you so much. Just before I bring up Eugene's question, Eugene, welcome. He says that this session was very informative, and I totally agree. Eugene wants to know how you strike the balance between receiving creative feedback and maintaining your own creative vision.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. Shout out to you as well. I think feedback is a delicate thing when it comes to creatives. Creatives hold their cards on their chest and they don't share. They only share when they feel like they're sharing it with the world, where they're at the point where they don't care whether you like it or not. But I think it's also important to have a circle of people that give you critical feedback as you're in the creative process. So feedback could be in three or three or four different ways. But I think what you're getting to is sometimes people can give you feedback, and it it's made to seem as if they hijacked your vision or idea and they've made you go elsewhere. I think internally you will always have to ask yourself, what am I willing to compromise on? And the question that helps you with that is, what is the most important thing that needs to be said in this creative piece? That helps me. What is the most important thing? Okay, it's this. A sub question is, how should it be said? So, for example, let's talk genre. If I have something important to say, and it's going to be said in the hip hop genre, if someone comes and says, hey, you know what would be nice is if it was Lingala, like, right? like like now that's too far left from my original vision. So I have a sieving process where that tells me, thank you for the feedback, but it's not applicable to what my vision was. Now, if someone comes and says, hey, I know you're doing hip hop, but you know what would be nice if we had like an Afrobeat section just for 4 bars. Now, that's a bit closer to my vision. There's a compromise there, but if I make that compromise, will it take away from the overall vision? So I think that's how you should kind of look at it. Have a heart of always hearing feedback, but knowing that if it veers off completely from my artistic vision, it is okay for me not to take it up. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I believe it is. Well, it has helped me. I hope that's okay, Eugene. Okay, I have some questions here actually that I got from some people who are not able to be live, but they asked me to post them.
Yeah.
And the first one is, how do you approach a potential collaborator for the first time? Like, what do you say?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. Um, so this 2018 Noel would have been, hey bro, let's do a song. 2024 Noel would actually be, hey, how are you doing? What are you up to this year? What are some of the moves you're trying to do? I'm more of, before I ask you for a collabo, that I have to have built a relationship with you. So when I approach a potential collaborator for the first time, they will not know they're a potential collaborator. I will approach with the intent of knowing who they are, learning from them, building a relationship. Because if you go hit that home run for the first time, trust me, your chats are going to be just blue ticks. So I would urge you to use wisdom in knowing when to bring up the collaborative idea. Now, if it's time bound, um, hopefully it is something that moves them as well. Because sometimes, let's say you're working on a project and you have to have done it by this time, and you really want this person to do it, and you don't have a relationship with them. That I understand, but where, as much as it's possible, build a relationship first.
Got you. And can you share a time when a collaboration didn't go as planned and how you handled it?
Yeah, I'm still handling it. Yeah, I have a good example of there's a Tanzanian musician I really love. His name is Paul Clement. I met Paul Clement in, I want to say 2018, 2019. And because there was a mutual respect for each other, like he, I think he just like responded to like one of my stories or something. I didn't even know he knew who I was. And when I saw there was correspondence, I said, hey, I was in my 2018 mode. I said, hey, we need to work together, right? I didn't build the relationship first. But because he respected my gift, he said, yeah, let's work together. And he came to Nairobi and we recorded music. And he came to Nairobi again, we recorded music. And then in the middle of the music being done, I got a version of it that wasn't the complete version. The producer who was working on the song at the time lost a whole hard drive that had our project on it. And the hard work of getting someone from another country to come here uh, went down the drain. So I couldn't use the song. We couldn't make any tweaks on the mix because we didn't have access to files. And so the blunder that I did was at the time is I was terrified to tell this guy because I was like, I feel like I've wasted his time. And mind you, he's like way huger than I could ever be. So I felt like he was doing me the favor. But I mean, we did communicate at some point where I explained what happened, and currently in the process of trying to do something else. But yeah, it didn't go as planned. And how I handled it is I cried myself to sleep. Then after I recovered, I reestablished the relationship and explained why. Because I think you also owe your collaborators an explanation when things don't go as planned. And if you're honest, they will understand. But I think if you go quiet, then they feel like they were sort of slighted. And so that's what I needed to manage, just to make sure that he understands that it wasn't anything that he did. It was more of a technical error that occurred, and yeah. So I think that's the one that stands out in my head.
I love it. I love it. It's very important what you've just said, that you need to just be brave enough to just say it, because stuff happens. And like
Yeah.
for me, I'm at the place where I'm like, everything happens for a reason. Maybe the song was not supposed to be, maybe it was just not the right time. And
Mm.
working here with mostly Germans in the crew for the last 3 months, I have seen the importance of just be direct and say, yeah, it happened, and yeah, so how can we sort out the thing? And so yeah, but I guess the crying was nice too.
For sure.
All right. What are some red flags to watch out for when choosing a collaborator?
My number one red flag is if the collaborator does not view it as mutually beneficial. And oftentimes you will not find that out from your conversations. When you speak to anyone who is willing in any remote way to do work with you, it will always be love. It will always be, yeah, man, yeah, I've seen what you've been doing, man. I appreciate you. Like, yeah, you're putting in the work. Hey, man, you can sing. Oh, you can play. Like that. That'll be the conversation between you and the person. But if you log out of that conversation and when it's time for action, there is inaction, that is a huge red flag. If there's time for communication and there is lack of communication, where you're communicating and it is one sided, it feels like you're talking to yourself, that is a red flag. When it is time to push the product and there is a general unwillingness to do it, that is a red flag. And I think all these things point to the networking thing that I talked about. Sometimes people can recognize you for the work that you've done or the potential you have, but they feel like, you're benefiting more than I am. I think that's the overall red flag. If it feels one-sided, that you're the one campaigning for this and they aren't keen, that's a red flag. Take a step back, put in more work on your craft until it's at the point where anyone across the board feels it is mutually beneficial.
Oh, fantastic. Just one final question from me. I don't know if there are any tools or platforms that you use to facilitate finding and managing collaborations.
Yes, yes. There's one primarily that I use, especially when I'm trying not to I'm trying to get outside of my circle, or to have access to people whom I've never met. There's a site called soundbetter.com. Soundbetter.com. Um, this is a site where you will have access to anyone that works in the music field, whether it's a singer, a songwriter, a producer, a mix engineer, master engineer, and it's all levels. So it could be someone who's just beginning, maybe you have a beginner budget, or it could be a Grammy award winning producer. You have access to them. And I've used this for a couple of my releases, especially on the mastering end. Just getting access to people who have world class resumes, but don't know what's happening in your continent, would never have met you if not for the internet. I think that's the number one tool that I'd recommend. Soundbetter.com.
Thank you so much. I cannot see any other questions in the comments. I just love for you guys to show Noel some love because that was really a totally amazing session. Please just throw in some comments there, emojis, whatever you want. Just let's
Mhm.
appreciate Noel for a really amazing session. And just like that, we've reached the end of another incredible, I call them a jam session, like jam, guest
Well
expert
done.
masterclass session. And a huge thank you to Noel for sharing his profound insights. Now, as we wrap up, please show him some love. And then if you want to connect with him, I'll just show you his his links and stuff. So Noel has a website there, noelderitu.com. If you want to have a look at the things that he's doing and connect with him, you can also connect with him on Instagram at handle is Noel Nderitu. And then on Facebook, /Nderitu.Noel, and then on Twitter at Noel Nderitu. But I'm sure you can find all those things if you go to his website. And
Yeah.
remember, if you missed anything from today's session or just want to experience it again, I definitely will. No worries. So this recording will be available for free for the next month. So you can always dive back in as many times as you like and soak up all the knowledge and share it with your friends as well so that they can just come and really glean from this amazing session that we've had. After this 1 month, the session will be moved into the Successful Singer Squad Vault. We also call it the Triple S Vault. And you can join Triple S today for 1,000 shillings a month, and you get unlimited access to invaluable resources like a session we did with Chris Adwar, who was discussing how to find your unique voice and ace your studio recordings. We also had a session with June Gashui, who is a lawyer and a performer as well, who can advise you on the essentials of copyright and intellectual property law. We also spoke with Lydia Ndwiga, who is a singer-songwriter as well, on writing songs that resonate across generations. They don't just last 1 week at the top and that's it. We've also chatted with Nikita Kering, who showed us her songwriting process from beginning to end, and we went through that with her in that session. Winnie Mureithi, a fantastic educator, will show you how to bring passion to your stage performances. Kate Wanjiku, shared she's a social media expert, and she shared a blueprint that can help singer songwriters know how to use social media to build their brand and get known far and wide. And I also speak in one of the sessions on how the foundations of hit songwriting. And you also get to join our inner circle of like-minded individuals who are here to support you and cheer you on. Really, the only thing we want to see is for you to succeed. And more sessions are lined up. Next month we will be with Rodney of Rodman Shot It. Rodney is the one who has done Nikita's some of Nikita's music videos, and I really find them amazing. And I thought that would be something that my people would enjoy, learning how to come up with fantastic videos. I mean, I always talk about Nikita because I was her singing teacher, so I always try and leverage that network. Yes, so yeah, so and then also in the month of August, we will have a lawyer joining us on just helping you to know how to monetize your music and how to make sure that all your rights and interests are protected. So that would be a good person to come and ask about, the contracts that even Noel was talking about. And yeah, if you want to join us, you just need to go to, I'll just put it up here. Okay. If you just go to courses.jacarandamusichub.co.e/SSS or triple S, you'll have that. And if you have any questions, you can also send me an email at info@jacarandamusichub.co.ke. So it's been really amazing. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please also follow us on social media so that you can get updates on upcoming sessions. So until next time, keep making music, keep learning, keep inspiring, and see you all at the next jam session.
Goodbye.
Yeah.